trying to think back now. In the second report, you obviously would have given reasons why you thought that General Dramat and General Sibia should not be charged with misconduct or any crime. Is that right?
That's correct.
Did anybody, whether it's the minister or somebody from the NPA or anybody, ever engage with your reasons to say, but these reasons you have given for this recommendation in the second report are just nonsense, or even are just wrong?
None whatsoever, Chairperson. You see, as I was saying, that it only transpired later that there were agendas into the whole issue. Because what had happened was that at some point, and I'm not sure if Mr. Kuba will testify also about that, at some point, Mr. Kuba and Mr. Maoka, who was our Director, Legal Services, engaged with prosecutors at the NPA and Advocate Baloyi, if I'm not mistaken. And in their discussion, Advocate Baloyi was of the view that our investigative conclusion and what we're recommending it in our report was actually sustainable. And when, at the later time again, when they engaged with him, then he allegedly informed them that after engaging with his superiors, I think the word they used that he must just bite the bullet. You know, Mr. Kuba and Mr. Maoka deposed statements to that effect, which the executive director referred to the NPA to say they must look into this issue. Of course, nothing came of it.
So, but you say earlier on, he said he conceded that, did he concede that the reasons given for that recommendation, that there should be no charges for General Sibia and General Dramat, did he accept that
Yes.
those were good reasons?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, he said that.
Yes.
But later on...
So at the time, excuse me, at the time they were engaging, even before the actual decision was taken.
Yes.
And to their surprise, at a later day, I think it could have been days later, then he said, no, they must bite a bullet after consulting with their superiors.
Yes.
So it was clear that even though he held an opinion at the time that
that there were good grounds.
There are good grounds
Yes.
for saying
There should be no charges.
there should be no charges, but obviously someone high up was saying, no, you should.
They must be charged.
They must be charged, and hence ultimately the decision that was taken was that they must be charged, which
Yes.
was later changed, and the
Yes.
charges were now dropped against them.
Yes. Yeah. So, you know of nobody who ever said, well, there's something wrong with the basis for your recommendation that General Sibia and General Dramat should not be charged?
No. No one had said that, Chair. Even when you read the Werksman report, nowhere in the report are they alleging that our investigative conclusion and our recommendation as per the report, it's not sound in law. None of that is alleged. All what they are saying is that we altered the so-called first report.
Yes.
So no one comes to us and say, but hang on, you've got it wrong here and here and here, you know. But you see, to us, what is also surprising is that in the work we do, it happens every time. We make recommendations to the NPA that says prosecute. And then the NPA will say, no, we're not going to prosecute. We accept that because it's within their domain to make those. They're independent body that can make that decision, despite our recommendation. And sometimes we say prosecute, sometimes we say do not prosecute, we don't think there is evidence. And they would say, no, actually we think there is evidence to prosecute. So it's something that is normal in our environment. So now to come and try and make a huge thing, and we ended up being charged even criminally and departmentally about having an opinion about your investigation is completely absurd.
I mean, in regard to Mr. Kuba, the best, it seems, that could be said against him is that he changed his opinion, not the report.
Yes.
He changed his opinion from one that said General Dramat and General Sibiya should be charged to one that says they should not be charged.
Yes.
That's the worst, that's the best that one can put it for the prosecutors.
Yes.
But in regard to you and Mr. McBride, it can only amount to saying, why did you reach the opinion that, the conclusion that these two should not be charged?
Yes. I agree with you, Chairperson, completely. In fact, also as regards Mr. Kuba, he, in the McBride constitutional matter, he deposed a comprehensive affidavit, and I'm sure he'll testify about it,
Yes.
showing what were the differences and what, in his opinion, changed his views. You know? So, I mean, there's a good reason why he came to the conclusion that he did. There's a good reason why I was of the view, when I engaged with him, that there was no evidence to sustain a criminal prosecution or even misconduct against General Dramat and General Sibiya.
And even if they didn't agree with your conclusion, that on its own should be no grounds to
Exactly.
to charge you.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like just a simplistic example, Chair. It's like charging a Supreme Court or High Court judge for having arrived at a particular decision which is different from maybe a superior court to that. It doesn't make sense.
Yes, Ms. Benson.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Sissoko, you were arrested on the 16th of March 2016. I'm reading from paragraph 49 on page 13 of your affidavit.
That's correct.
Pardon? It's
Yes, I'm
paragraph
saying that is
49.
correct.
Yes, sorry. Could you explain to the Chair the circumstances of your arrest?
Chair, what had happened was that we were first approached by these investigators from the DPCI unit called CATS. It's the Crimes Against the State. Now, as we understand, this unit's mandate in the DPCI, it's actually to investigate serious crimes against the state, like your cases of treason, terrorism, and so forth. So it was actually interesting that they are now investigating a case of fraud and defeating the ends of justice. Incidentally, the same unit is the very same unit that was investigating Minister Godan and the so-called SARS rogue unit. In fact, when they called us to their offices for a warning statement, it was our files, and then the rogue unit file was there, as if it was they were trying to show us that they are also doing that investigation. But we submitted comprehensive statements as warning statements explaining this whole issue. My warning statement was about a file. If my memory serves me well, I think Mr. Kuba's could have been 2 files, Agliva files. Mr. McBride was possibly 5, 6 Agliva files. I think we submitted our statement on a Thursday or on a Friday. But on Sunday, we got messages that we must come to their offices. A decision has been made that we must be charged criminally. We presented ourselves to their offices, and they processed that, took our fingerprints and so forth. Lo and behold, for the first time, we realized that actually they had warrants for our arrest. Now, we're senior government officials and not flight risk to anyone. And also, given the nature of the allegations against us, in my humble view, they didn't warrant a J50 warrant of arrest. But be that as it may, we were taken to police cells where we were kept for some few hours until we appeared in court and then granted 1,500 rand bail. It was the most humiliating moment of my life because I never imagined that I will get arrested in that fashion purely for doing my job.
And was this aired on television, your arrest?
Yes, it was a very big spectacle because there was media all over. It was on radio, on television. As we were walking, we were being followed by journalists and so forth.
Well, I said earlier this morning that I have given instructions that all dockets or files that will show me what information the relevant prosecutors or people and the relevant police officers had before them, before they made certain decisions, should be gathered. I want to take this opportunity, now that you have said how much information you placed before them, yourself, Mr. McBride and Mr. Kuba, I would like you to assist the Commission to get as much of that documentation as possible. I have been told that there have been challenges in getting these documents. I think it's been months that I asked that they be found, whether it's court papers in regard to those of you who went to court on matters which may be related to what we are dealing with in regard to you, whether it's court papers, court judgments, whether it's police, the prosecutors' files, everything in terms of being charged on matters that relate to this. I want to see all of that because I want to see whether on what was before various people, various officers, there could be a basis for anybody to make the decisions that were made. And so please, if you could speak to also Mr. McBride and Mr. Kuba, if you could all assist. The relevant person within the Commission is Ms. Lerato Buthelezi. There are investigators who have been working on it as well, but she, if you are in touch with her, she will know what to do. I want to see all of that.
Chair, we'll definitely do so. All
Yes.
the information we have,
Yes.
we'll submit to the court.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. You've already dealt with the fact that on the 1st of November 2016, the case against you was withdrawn, apparently because there weren't any witnesses, and the fact that Mr. July refused to testify.
That is correct, Chair.
Now, is it correct that hereafter, pursuant to a further, I've forgotten the name of what it was, as a result of the appearance before the Bargaining Council, an agreement and an arrangement was made that you would be reinstated?
That is correct.
And that occurred on the 23rd of November 2016.
The arbitration set on the 22nd,
Yes.
and the agreement was that I'll go back to work on the 23rd of November.
So it was the next day.
Yes.
Chair, we will get the judgment in the arbitration or copies of the proceedings.
Yes.
Yeah.
You touched on a little bit earlier what the state of play was when you returned to your work at IPID, and the investigations that you had left a good year, 18 months previously, and where they were at this stage. Could you deal in some detail now with those investigations and what happened and has been happening since you've been back in your job?
Chairperson, when I returned to work, obviously I resumed my duties as the National Head of Investigation. And the first thing I was confronted with was that Mr. McBride, in my absence, because he came back earlier than me in October, he had appointed a team which is in my unit. We call it NSIT, National Specialized Investigative Team, to investigate allegations of corruption against former Acting National Commissioner General Pahlani. The complaint had come from Mr. Paul O'Sullivan. And when I started engaging with the team, I was able to establish that Mr. Paul O'Sullivan had approached IPID in March already, whilst we were on suspension, about these allegations. And that IPID had done nothing to investigate these allegations.
And this was now in November.
That was in November now, 2016. And upon getting a complaint of this nature, upon receiving complaint from Mr. O'Sullivan, Mr. McBride then established this team. So when I came back, I had to manage this team.
Can you recall around about when Mr. McBride had come back from his
Mr. McBride went back to the office in October.
Oh, so he had come back
2016.
just the previous month?
Yes, the previous month.
Okay.
So the team had already started investigating this matter and had also went to the residential premises in estate.
Just before that, so prior to Mr. McBride coming back in October, all along, the acting executive head was Mr. Khamanyana.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
And he did nothing to investigate this matter. In fact, as part of the investigation, we were able to establish that he had made a contact with General Pahlani to make him aware of these allegations. And he had appointed Mr. Khomu, who was acting in my position to be the designated investigator in this matter. However, the team, when they received this dockets after appointment by Mr. McBride, they found that no investigation was done on this matter. So
I guess it might not therefore be accurate to say nothing had been done completely, in the sense that, at least from the point of view of Mr. Khamanyan, he had appointed somebody to be the investigator, but then that person had done nothing.
yeah, no investigation was done.
Yes, okay.
You see, the issue is, and the events that followed shows a pattern that there was never an intention to investigate that.
Mm-hmm.
Because the very same person who was supposedly supposed to do this investigation, upon our return, then requested a transfer back to the police, to the CI, because he was in CI. So he got transferred back to the CI environment.
Or he was from crime intelligence?
Yes.
Okay.
So he got a transfer to the police, to the crime intelligence.
But wasn't he supposed to go back anyway upon your return, because he was acting and had come from
No. He was appointed in IPIT. Mr. Khamanyan had appointed him as a director, NSID.
But
so he was a permanent employee of IPIT.
Yes.
But so this shows us that there was some shenanigans that were happening, because immediately upon our return, Mr. Khamanyan got a transfer initiated by the Minister and General Ntlameza to the DPCI,
and
without the consent of the Executive Director.
And the Minister now was still Mr. Natintlek?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And then Mr. Khomu also requested transfer back to the SAPS, and he was transferred back to the CI.
So they both elected to get out of IPIT?
Yes.
Upon your return,
yes,
and Mr. McBride's return?
Yes.
Whereas prior to that, they had been part of the staff of IPIT?
That is correct, Chairperson.
Yes, okay.
And the very same Mr. Khomu, when we were now fighting and there was all this interference with our investigation, and we were called by the Portfolio Committee on Police, he came on tour with General Pahlani to support General Pahlani against us on these allegations against General Pahlani as they were being ventilated at the Portfolio Committee of Police. So it was clear to us that there was never going to be any investigation against General Pahlani by this group anyway.
Well, you might or might not have skipped to get to that point,
yes,
but now that you are at that point, why would he go to the Portfolio Committee? Because he was no longer in IPIT, he was back in crime intelligence, Mr. Khomu?
Remember, he was now he got transferred to work for the SAPS in CI, crime intelligence.
Yes,
SAPS.
yes.
The Portfolio Committee then invited IPIT and SAPS, and General Pahlani was still the acting national commissioner, because this investigation we're conducting against him was all over the media. And I think the Portfolio Committee at the time, in their wisdom, they thought if they call us
Or if they called everybody
Yes,
who might have had something to do with this.
yes,
Yeah,
you know,
okay.
to brief them what is happening on these
Yes,
issues.
okay.
Then he also came as part of the delegation of General Pahlani.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So when when the investigation started in earnest, General Pahlani then,
And you were leading those investigations?
yes, I was now leading
Yes.
the investigation.
Yes.
Uh,
I guess that must be 2017 then.
no, 2016.
Still 2016.
Still 2016 in November. Yes. So first, there were threats to one of our investigators, Mr. Mandla Mahlangu, death threats to his life via SMS messages. He received 2 SMS messages. And in those messages, they also made threats to the executive director, Mr. McBride, as well as Mr. Paul O'Sullivan. And then, as a result of those threats, then we procured the services of Ms. Teresa Buota to assist in tracking where these messages were coming from Fidelity, a security company. But also what had happened was that General Pahlani then instructed an investigation that there was, or under the pretext that there was a security breach to his residence. In fact, we have statements from crime intelligence officials who attended to that complaint of General Pahlani, and they deposed a statement to us that upon attending to that complaint, they've actually established that there was no security breach. In fact, it was a legitimate IPIT investigation. But General Pahlani, not only did that, they called the Mabula team from Northwest to start an investigation on the pretext of the security breach. But this was, in fact, their way of interfering with our investigation. And they actually even approached the witnesses that had already deposed statements to our investigators on these allegations of corruption against General Pahlani. And this General Mabula and his team approached the very same witnesses. As a result of that, we laid criminal charges of defeating the ends of justice against both General Pahlani and the Mabula team. And we investigated those matters and referred them to the NPA. And the NPA declined to prosecute these matters, saying that they will reconsider their prosecution with the corruption investigations that we were still busy conducting. Now, we were of the view that there was enough evidence to prosecute. So we're not happy with the decision. We took up these issues with the NPA and the former National Director of Public Prosecution, Advocate Sean Abrams, raising our concern in relation to this matter. Now, this was not the only matter that we raised concern with. It was also in relation to the investigation that we also conducted against Mr. Khamanyani himself, on the allegations of corruption and the contravention of the PFMA. Now, we had a lot of correspondences with the NPA in relation to this issue and raising our concern, how decisions were taken in relation to our matters. And to our surprise, the response that we're getting from the NDPP was that he agrees with the decisions without giving us detailed reason why, in their view, that these cases were not prosecutable. In my view, if I make a representation that I'm not happy with the decision that was taken by a particular prosecutor, and then I would like you to review, what I expect is that even if you agree with the decision that was taken, but at least take an effort to explain what is the legal basis for that decision. But to say that there are no prospects of a successful prosecution is not good enough, because it's as good as saying I decline to prosecute in any event. So those are the
That's just the conclusion without the reasons.
Exactly, you know. So those were the issues that we were raising. I mean, in one of the correspondences, Chief, I remember well, General Pahlani has always been making allegations that we are being used by Paul O'Sullivan. He even went to an extent when we were at the portfolio committee of calling us, or our organization, OPIT, O'Sullivan, you know, O for O'Sullivan. So he was calling us OPIT. So he was making allegations that we have outsourced our investigation to Paul O'Sullivan. One of the correspondences that came from Advocate Sean Abrams was pushing the very same narrative, to say, no, he has declined to prosecute, he agrees with them, given the circumstances that we had outsourced our investigation to Paul O'Sullivan, or to a private individual, something to that effect. I can't remember the exact words. Something that we could not understand, to say, how do you come to that conclusion before you engage with us? We even had a meeting with him, myself and the executive director, trying to raise these issues and our concern that, you know, how these decisions are taken, and the inertia in taking this Pahlani investigation forward, including the fact that the AFU Asset Forfeiture Unit was not acting on these matters. It was a very funny meeting, because the management of the NPA sitting there were actually even excluded from talking. It came to a serious confrontation between Mr. McBride and Mr. Sean Abrams, to an extent that I had to calm down Mr. McBride to say, at the end, we need to get this meeting through and try to get some solution to this problem, because he was willing to leave at that time, the way the meeting was charged. So these decisions did not make sense to us. We continued to engage the NPA. Even after he was removed as the NDPP, we engaged Dr. Ramaite, who was appointed to act as the NDPP, and raised the same issues with him. And Dr. Ramaite undertook to appoint Advocate McAdams to look at all these cases and be able to deal with it. And we started some work with him to start dealing with these issues. Unfortunately, he was not officially appointed by Dr. Ramaite, so he couldn't take the matters further until recently Advocate Batoi was appointed to that position, and then we engaged further with her, and it's only now that we see these matters being taken seriously and being reviewed by the NPA.
These matters that you are talking about, are the matters where you hold the view or have the perception that the refusal to prosecute was not based on or decisions not to prosecute were not based on legitimate legal grounds.
That is correct, Chairperson. And in our correspondence, we sharply raised that. We raised the issue that we believe that the NPA is biased in taking some of these decisions. Just to make an example, Chair, in one of the matters where Mr. O'Sullivan is the complainant, the two senior advocates in the NPA took a decision that the officials from the Mabula team must be prosecuted. And they did a memorandum to Advocate Malloy to that effect. To our surprise, when the decision, they informed us about this. And we even got a hold of that memorandum. To our surprise, when the decision came as decline to prosecute. When we questioned why decline to prosecute, the response we get is that, no, I agree with the DPP, without giving us reasons. What is the legal reason for not prosecuting, especially in the face of senior advocates in that office saying there's a case to be answered here? They even warned in their memo that the NPA could even suffer civil suits if these matters are not prosecuted. So it shows, and there's a pattern in other matters also, that shows that there was that kind of a bias and an unwillingness on the part of the NPA during that time to take our matters seriously and prosecute them. In fact, the Pandey matter, nothing happened with it. And even when we pursued it, we were told that, no, there is a challenge by one of the complainants and so, but nothing was happening. But what is strange is that just before the judgment on the removal of Advocate Sean Abrams, then the decision was made to prosecute. So you only have
without anything new having happened.
Exactly. You know, you ask yourself, but why does it happen now? You know, all of a sudden there is this decision now, you know, when all of the time we've been asking and nothing was happening. So in our view, there was never an intention to deal with these matters. Only when, in my view, there was probably a realization that he maybe removed that he thought maybe he must then make the right decision on this matter. But these other matters, nothing had happened. Only now with the new NDPP that the restrictions on these matters. The Mabula matter, for instance, as I've indicated earlier on torture, there's a decision already to prosecute on it.
Now, these matters where there have been refusals, decisions to refuse to prosecute that you are talking about, are you able to group them in one way or another under a particular category, maybe such as it's cases that have got political connections, it's cases that relates to corruption that involves people who may have been in high places within government, or people who are close to people in high office in government, or anything like that? Or is it difficult to group them together? They are just different cases.
Chair, they can be grouped in that way. The Pandey matter, for instance, got political connections. The other matters, it's high-ranking police officers. We're talking generals that are involved. Later on in my statement, I'll talk about the matters relating to CI, crime intelligence, which involved also senior police officers, where we can't move forward with those investigations because of refusal to declassify documents. So it's when we investigate low-ranking officers, we never get any interference. But you start investigating generals, then you get this kind of interference. Hence, I've said that we even had to go to court to get an order to stop the Mabula team from interfering with our investigations.
Well, this commission is supposed to also look at how the NPA may have also played a role in advancing state capture or out of corruption protected certain people. And it may well be that a lot of the cases you are talking about are cases that could show what I'm talking about, either part of state capture or decisions not to prosecute being based on corruption and other such considerations. And I would like you and your colleagues in IPED to consider looking at all those cases and looking at the terms of reference of the Commission and seeing whether you are able to select all those that you think fall under our terms of reference, where there was a reluctance or refusals to prosecute when actually there should have been prosecutions, but not cases where you might say, somebody, there could be different views and so on, but where you say, look, it really does look like there was some really illegitimate reasons for not prosecuting. And if you are able to put those together, do so and be in touch with the legal team so that ultimately maybe the Commission can look at all of them.
We'll certainly do so, Chairperson, because it's part of the submissions that we've made to the NDPP Advocate Batowi.
Yes.
To say all these cases,
Yes.
these are the issues we have with them.
Yes.
And we feel that
Yes.
justice was not done in
Yes.
these matters.
No, please do that together with whatever correspondence you might have exchanged with the NPA where you were questioning why certain decisions were being taken or why prosecutions were not following. So arrange to do that, and it may well be that whether officially the IPED does that or just individuals who were involved within IPED, also come and assist the Commission with evidence that could be looked at.
We'll certainly do that, Chairperson. I think also as part of the attachment to my statement, I've attached some of the correspondences.
Yes.
That we exchanged with the NPA and raising
Yes.
specific concern
Yes.
with regard to these matters. I mean, my honest view is that some of the generals were being protected, or some of the officers that were being used to put a particular, to push a particular agenda were being protected from prosecution, whereas others were being prosecuted. I mean, just to illustrate this, Chairperson, as part of the interference with our investigation and to counter our investigation, the Mabula team arrested Mr. Paul O'Sullivan when there was a court order that says they must not arrest him. They further charged 2 of our investigators, Mr. Mahlangu and Mr. Bina. In the indictment, part of the charge is that they pretended to be IPID investigators. But they are IPID investigators. Now, I can't fathom how a prosecutor draw up a charge sheet like that that says, I'm charging you for pretending to be an IPID investigator when in fact you are an IPID investigator. In any event, in matters of this nature, like where a person pretends to be a police officer, one of the important statements that you must abstain is from IPID or from the SAPS to say whether this person is in fact a member of the police or a member of IPID.
Yes.
No such thing happened. No one came to us to say, are these people your investigators or not? But they have been charged for.
Yeah, I want all of those cases, because we can't hope to clean up corruption in this country if there is a lot of corruption within law enforcement agencies. We can't, and it's not good for the country for people to know that if you are a low-ranking official, you will be arrested, you will be charged, you will be brought to court, but if you are high-ranking, you will be protected from prosecution. You can do whatever, corruption and do crime, you will be protected. It can't be. And if we can't sort that out, then we just have no chance of sorting out corruption in this country. So everybody needs to know that when our Constitution says everyone is equal before the law, that is what everybody will implement. That's what courts will ensure is implemented. That's what police will implement. That's what everybody will do. The law is the only place where we are all supposed to be equal. And if you have a situation where the general public thinks that the law, people are not equal before the law, you bring the law into disrepute. And the consequences for law and order in the country would be far-reaching.
Thank you,
Yes, Ms.
Chair.
Benson.
Mr. Sissoko, could you also please tell the Chair about the interference that you had from Brigadier Nkomo and the Mabula team approaching your investigators and offering bribes that you referred to in paragraph 65?
That's correct, Chair. Chair, as I've already indicated that we had to go to court to interdict General Mabula's team from interfering with our investigation and counter-investigating us.
And really, for one law enforcement agency to have to go to court to get an interdict against other law enforcement people to say, don't interfere with our process. To reach that stage, things must be very bad.
Chair, it was bad. You see, from our side, we tried everything, and understanding that we were within the same ministry, we tried our best to get this thing resolved internally. So we approached the national. Of course, we could not approach General Pahlani because he's the one who brought them in.
Yes.
To counter our investigation. But after he was suspended by Minister Mbalula, then we approached the then acting National Commissioner, General Mutiba, to say we need to resolve this issue. It cannot be that people that were investigating as IPID start investigating us. Police has got almost 200 police officers. Surely you can't tell me that you can't find a police officer that is not subject of our investigation to investigate us if they believe there is some wrongdoing on the part of our investigators. We are not immune to investigation. And we welcome an investigation if there's any wrongdoing. But you can't ask the very people who are investigating to investigate us. Surely there won't be any objectivity in that investigation. And that's exactly what Judge Tuchtin found, that these officers were conflicted. And in fact, in his judgment, has said that the police must go back and look at their act so that there is no conflict of interest in how the police conducted the investigation. We have a similar provision in our act that our investigators cannot investigate in a matter where they've got a conflict of interest. So we tried in that kind of engagement. And General...
So that had to go to court for a judge to make a decision.
Yes.
And then nobody within SAPS high up could say, this is nonsense.
Yes.
This should be sorted out. Let's get other people to investigate.
Exactly, Chair. To General Mutiba's credit, he instructed his legal team to sit with our legal team and try and resolve this matter. We held a meeting with them and an advocate from the Office of the State Attorney. When the representative from General Mutiba's office came and said, my instruction from General Mutiba is that we must resolve this issue, they refused. They refused.
But how could they refuse?
Chair, it's a funny thing. Even when we went to court, the people who were opposing our application, it was General Mabula and his team. The National Commissioner was not opposing.
And yet they are under the National Commissioner.
Yes, Chair. That is what happened. The judge read out a barrage of correspondences that we've been sending to the police management to try and get this thing resolved. And made it that clearly IP tried to get this thing resolved. And there is no commitment on the police to get this thing resolved. It's the same thing that is happening with the issue of declassification. We are now in court. There is litigation pending on this issue because they are refusing to declassify documents that we need for investigation.
Well, if we don't have Judge Tuchten's judgment here, please get a copy. Have we got it?
Yes, we've got it.
Yes. Well, now that you have touched on the issue of declassification, you may or may not be aware that last week I had evidence from Colonel Rulofse in regard to the challenges he met with trying to get the various national police commissioners to declassify various documents that he needed for his own investigations. And I have indicated that I will want the National Commissioner to be approached so that he can say whether he is prepared to declassify those documents insofar as they are relevant for the Commission's investigation or not, and if he is not, what the reasons are. But I asked him whether there wasn't litigation, because I thought I'd read somewhere about there being litigation relating to declassification and relating to classification being used for illegitimate reasons and so on. So maybe that's what I was thinking about, if there is litigation that IPET is involved in.
That is correct, Chair. What had happened was that after we had an MOU with the Inspector General of Intelligence, we started getting involved in investigations that are happening in the crime intelligence, particularly the Secret Service account. There's widespread corruption happening in that environment. Now, the first investigation actually we got involved with is the same investigation that Colonel Rulofse was investigating against General Mdluli. Now, the reason we got involved is also that it was referred to us through Parliament because of the frustrations that Colonel Rulofse was experiencing. And we wrote to the police about declassifying specifically those matters. That it was, in fact, our first correspondence with them in relation to declassification. We started with General Pahlani, General Mutiba, General Sithole. None of them declassified these documents. We followed up with a further request in relation to our investigations on iView. We call them iView 1, 2, 3. Several millions of corruptions, tens of millions of corruption involved. So we also asked declassification in those matters, and there was no positive response. In fact, at some point, we were called to Scopa in Parliament.
To Scopa, yes.
Scopa, yes.
Yeah.
And we lamented the same thing, that the police are refusing to classify documents. And the National Commissioner, General Sithole, made an undertaking in that meeting that within 14 days, he will declassify the documents. However, that never happened. Because of these frustrations, Chair, we then resorted to Section 205 subpoena in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act. And we subpoenaed General Sithole, General Fuma, General Tsumani, and the former Minister Mbalula's advisor, Mr. Mbindwana. When they were supposed to hand over documents and come for interviews, because part of what we wanted to interview in relation to these investigations, then they went and challenged our 205 subpoena. And that is when then we opposed their challenge and did a counter application to force them to declassify these documents and hand them over to us. And we currently waiting for the Judge President to allocate a date for the matter to be heard. Now, this is despite the fact that IPID Act, Section 29 thereof, provides that the SAPS must assist us in terms of handing over documents that we need for the purpose of investigation, on giving us statements and so forth. And they refuse to do so. Section 4.2 of the IPID Act provides that any state institution must cooperate with us to ensure that we are able to achieve our mandate. Despite those legal imperatives, they still refuse. In fact, when we received their papers, they are saying to us that it's only the Standing Committee on Intelligence that can declassify documents, which is absurd. We've got a policy document, which is MIS, Minimum Information Security Standard, which provides how issues of classification must be dealt with, and who can classify and who can declassify. It's very clear. That is the person who classifies the document or the head of the institution, which in this instance may be the National Commissioner or the Divisional Commissioner of Crime Intelligence, not the Standing Committee. But that is what they are saying in their papers, which we find
Do they
it
refer
upset.
to any legislation to support that, as far as you recall?
I think they do, but it's, in our view, a misinterpretation of that legislation. Because the legislation does not say that in any event, the issue of declassification, it's clear on the MIS how it must be handled.
But if
And it was even dealt with in the constitutional judgment of Masitla and former President Thabo Mbeki.
yes, in the constitutional court.
Yes.
But if they had, if on their knowledge, only that committee could deal with it, why didn't they, all these 7, 8 years that Mr. Colonel Roloff has been asking for these documents, why didn't they say you are coming to wrong people, go to Parliament?
Chair, that is obfuscation. There is nothing like that.
Assuming
in my
that they are
humble
correct.
Yes, and you're right. Assuming they are correct, that's what they should have done. If they were committed to doing it, they should have written to the committee and say, IPID requests these matters to be declassified to enable them to conduct investigation. Can you please declassify them? That has never happened.
And that is difficult to understand also because Parliament is a different arm of the state.
Exactly.
They are a different arm of the state.
Exactly. And they're not involved in the operational issues of the SAPS. So you cannot expect Parliament to be dealing with classification and declassification of documents of the SAPS. This is also, Chair, despite the advice from the Inspector General of Intelligence that the information that IPID is requesting has nothing to do with the security of the state.
So
it's all about procurement matters.
The Inspector General has actually advised
has
them
written
along these
and
lines.
advised.
And they know about that.
They know about that.
And how long ago was that, if you are able to remember?
I think it was, it could be early this year or late last year.
Yes.
When we received those advice from the Inspector General.
And their challenge when you subpoenaed them and your counter application, when did they, were they launched? How far back?
See, I'm speaking under correction. It could be early this year.
Could be early this year.
Yes, or late last year.
Okay. So at this stage, as far as you know, all papers have been filed in court and all that remains is a date for hearing to be allocated.
Yes. That's as far as I know.
Now, the documents that you have been asking for, in other words, which will be affected by the decision of the court in that matter, would they cover almost all the documents that Colonel Roloff was looking for?
Yes, it also includes those documents and other investigations that we're busy with.
Yes. Okay. So it may well be that relevant parties should make an approach to the Judge President to ask that the date be given as soon as possible, because this is holding up lots of investigations for years.
That is correct, Chair. The advice I got from our head of legal is that that's the position now. We're waiting for a court date to be allocated.
Yes, and that maybe, if at all possible, the date shouldn't be too far away. Of course, the Judge President, looks at everything in his own court and so on, but he probably, if representations are made to him and he is made to understand the impact of the delay in these investigations because of the declassification, he would make his decision from an informed position. But part of what is concerning me, despite the fact that you say you are now waiting for a date for hearing, is that the date for hearing and the handing down of the judgment might not mean the end of the problem, because if, for argument's sake, the National Commissioner is successful, or rather, or is unsuccessful, and IPED succeeds, they might seek to appeal. And then we could see another 3 years, if not more, of a delay in regard to finalizing these matters. And by that time, these documents that Colonel Roloff has started looking for in 2012 or 2011, I mean, those cases would have been more than 10 years old. And it's really an untenable situation.
Chair, unfortunately, in our environment, these are kind of problems we're dealing with, because unfortunately, we don't investigate ordinary citizens. We investigate law enforcement officers who understand the criminal justice system and how it works.
Yes.
And they can be able to manipulate it. I mean, in this Pahlani investigation, we conducted a search on one of the service providers, FDA, and they challenged our search. We opposed, we went to court, the High Court found in our favor. They petitioned the Supreme Court of Appeals. They failed twice there. And now they're saying they're taking it to the Constitutional Court. And their arguments have not changed. So it is clear to us that is to delay this as far as possible, because what we have seized, we cannot touch until these processes
the litigation is finalized. Yes.
And that impacts on our ability to conclude these investigations. It's a similar thing with the classification. Until such time that we get the documents, we can't finalize our investigations on these matters.
Well, I think that if the executive wants to be seen to be meaning business about fighting corruption, then there must be there must be clarity on when will they refuse to declassify, and why would they refuse declassifying when it is said that the documents that are being sought for purposes of investigation, and the investigation relates to corruption among other things, and with lots of money that has been lost through all of that. It's really a pity that this has been allowed to go on for so long. There's a need for decisive action. There's a need for decisive action on the part of the executive. Because in the end, I mean, courts get asked to deal with, some of the matters that courts get asked to deal with are matters that can be resolved by the leadership of the executive. To say this is wrong, this is what must happen, and it must happen. And those who don't want to comply with lawful instructions should be dealt with.
You know what's funny, Chair, is that our Act, as I've indicated, Section 29 says it places an obligation on the police to cooperate with us in terms of giving us whatever information we need for investigative purposes, whether it be documents, whether it be statement, whatever. It does not make exception that only if it's not a classified document. Our Act specifically provides that we must be vetted. I hold a top secret clearance. There's a reason for that, so that I can have access to top secret information. Now, even if they've classified, if we're all working in good faith, they should make the documents available to me because I have a top secret clearance. and then be able to raise whatever concerns they want to raise with me in relation to the information contained there, as to which information can go to court, which information they believe shouldn't go to court because it can affect state security. And I'm sure we'll be amenable to listen to that.
Yes, so in other words, when they know that IPED people have got, such as you, have got top security clearance, there is no reason why they can't say, okay, come, let's sit here, let's look at these documents. We are concerned that these might be a problem if they get to be known publicly.
Exactly.
And then you can discuss, and
Exactly.
then you can look at those that might be no problem. You might be able to agree that these,
Exactly.
I think I agree, these
Exactly.
I don't agree.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
even that doesn't take place.
That doesn't take place.
Yeah.
We had an opportunity, Chair, to go to the UK, to a similar institution like ours, IPCC, and to understand how they do their work. And this issue also came up to say, how do they deal with these issues? They say, no. They get access to any document in possession of their police service. It doesn't matter whether it's classified or not classified. And they will make a determination which information can be exposed or not exposed based on those security considerations. So I'm sure this is something that we could have done ourselves with the SAPS. And the missed document is very clear that they cannot use classification to hide criminality in the SAPS.
Well, that's what Colonel Roloff also emphasized last
Yes.
week. Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And we had thought that our work is trying to assist them to deal with issues of corruption in the environment. Now, denying us access to this and ability to be able to deal with this corruption, it does not assist them either. So then you have to ask yourself, why they are refusing to give us this document? Is it because senior members are suspects in these investigations?
Yes, Ms. Vincent.
Thank you. On that topic further, could you tell the Chair what happened pursuant to your crime intelligence investigations when you raided the offices of a service provider and seized computers and documents?
One of our investigations, we went to a service provider's premises and we seized documents. And after we've seized the documents, we've analyzed the information contained there. And it was clear that there were meetings that were held between the service provider and senior officers in the SAPS. In fact, part of our Section 205 subpoenas was to try and get the senior police officers to be interviewed so that we can understand what their involvement was in relation to the procurement that they wanted to do, and whether it was legitimate or not. Now, because of the fact that they challenged that, we could not take these matters any further. So it's very concerning to us that there's this refusal to engage with us on these matters. And we are not in any way suggesting that they are guilty of anything. But for us to be able to come to a conclusion on an investigation, we need to get all the facts. And my expectation is that any senior officer who knows that he has done nothing wrong, he should not have a problem engaging with us and telling us what were the circumstances surrounding the actions that they have taken at that point in time.
Well, those who refuse to declassify, you might not be accusing them of being guilty of anything. But if they, or some of them have been refusing to declassify documents that are said to have nothing to do with the security of the state, that really relate to allegations of corruption, and they have not been putting up any reason as to why these documents can't be said to be involved in allegations of corruption. It raises serious questions as to their motives for not declassifying. And there may well have to be an investigation as to whether such motives as they may have are not of a criminal nature.
That is correct, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Sissoko, you said that you had to get an interdict to stop the Mabula team interfering with your investigations. And if you just have regard to paragraph 65, I would just like you to tell the Chair what happened, notwithstanding the fact that you had an interdict against the Mabula team after that.
Chair, after we got the interdict, and the judge was very clear also that the SABS management must make an undertaking that they will remove this team from the investigating us, which undertaking they made. But subsequent to that, it must have been a month or so later, if not 2 months later, I was approached by one of my investigators, Mr. Mahlangu. And he came to me with a recording on his cell phone from the very same Brigadier Home who was in the iPad. And Brigadier Home was essentially telling Mr. Mahlangu that he must implicate us, the management and the NCT team, in wrongdoing. In exchange for that, then he will get a brigadier position in the SAPS. Now, if that is not gratification, I don't know what gratification is. Now, after I got this information, Mr. Mahlangu also said that, in fact, Brigadier Khome had said to him they must meet with General Mabula, which they did in Potchefstroom. And Mr. Mahlangu also recorded that meeting where the discussion was exactly around this issue, that they must implicate us. In fact, they also discuss about a prosecutor who will then prepare a statement for Mr. Mahlangu, which can be used against us. Now, this is despite the fact that there's an order that says they must not get involved, they must not interfere. That's how brazen these officers were. Now, subsequent to us learning about this, we called a meeting with the entire team, because now we're aware that there is these approaches. And in that meeting,
The entire team being your
the
team?
NSID team, my team, yes.
Yes. Oh,
In that team, we then ask them to disclose if they've been approached in the similar way as we have learned about Mr. Mahlangu. And only Mr. Mahlangu indicated that he's been approached. The rest of the team said they were never approached. However, in the recording, Mr. Home is heard saying that one of our investigators, Mr. Nkabinde, has already agreed to work with them against us. And in the meeting, Mr. Nkabinde doesn't say anything. After we've adjourned the meeting, it could have been the following day, I wrote to Mr. Nkabinde and informed him that I'm removing him from the team because we can't trust him anymore. He is originally from the KwaZulu-Natal office, and I said he must go back to the office of KwaZulu-Natal. He wrote to the executive director and said that he should not appoint either myself or Mr. Kuba to investigate these allegations of approach alleging impropriety on our part. Mr. McBride wrote back to him and said, if you have evidence that Sisoko and Kuba have conducted themselves in an unlawful manner, provide me with that evidence, then I will deal with them. None of that came forth. We registered a criminal investigation of corruption against the Mabula team, including our own, Mr. Nkabinde, for investigation. We also started with disciplinary processes against him. In fact, we suspended him, and then subsequently we held a disciplinary hearing. Or we're supposed to hold a disciplinary hearing. It never materialized because he offered through his attorneys that he will resign and offered that we make a settlement with him, which we did. He also made complaints against us with the public protector.
with the?
Public protector,
Yeah.
alleging wrongdoing against us in relation to appointments and procurement issues. Now, these allegations were not coming for the first time, because these allegations before then were sent to the Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission investigated those allegations and found them to be unsubstantiated. But they were now rehashed with the Office of the Public Protector. In my view, the Public Protector's Office was now being weaponized against us. Now, this is what we have been experiencing all along, that there is this fight back campaign against us so that it derails all these investigations that we're conducting. Now, recently there's a report that was issued by the Public Protector which makes findings against us. Myself, Mr. McBride, Mr. Kuba, Mr. Nomkonsi Netsianda, head of our corporate services, Ms. Mutlale, and Ms. Morosi, our head of legal. It's almost the entire management of IPID. Now, it's a separate matter. We're going to deal with it. We are clear that we don't agree with those findings. We're going to take them on review and interdict them. But that is the kind of situation that we find ourselves in. There must always be something. I've been subjected to investigation, and people in the police tell me that you know, they want to get something on you. You know, I talked to my banker the other time. My banker says, "What have you done? The police are looking for your financial information. What have you done?" So that's the kind of situation we find ourselves in. In my view, it's a pushback because we dared to investigate those that are not supposed to be investigated. So that is the situation we find ourselves in.
Must be a very difficult environment to work in.
It certainly is. It certainly is. It's continuous pushback.
And this is happening even in 2019.
Even now, as I've indicated, in my view, I believe that the Office of the Public Protector has been weaponized against us.
Yes, thank you.
Could you just give the chair an idea when that Public Protector's report came out?
The Public Protector's report was actually leaked.
Okay.
I first became aware of it from our investigators because it was doing rounds on WhatsApp. It was leaked also to the media. But us,
that
the
is
people
before it
who
was
are
officially released.
Yes, people who are implicated,
Yeah.
we have not received it officially. Actually, it was only received by our lawyers on the 19th, I think.
Last week.
Yeah. No. Today's
Or this
on
week.
Monday.
On Monday.
On Monday. And it was already making rounds from the 18th. And
It is now in the social media.
we understand from our lawyers that they've already been receiving media inquiries about it.
And Mrs. Sissoko,
Yes.
did the Public Protector interview you?
Yes, I was interviewed by the Public Protector.
Chair, I have no further questions. That concludes the evidence of Mr. Sissoko, unless you have further questions.
I think I don't have any further questions also, but you will remember some of the things that I've asked you to, some homework and assistance that I've asked you to give to the investigators and the legal team. That's yourself, Mr. McBride and Mr. Kuba. Please do that. But other than that, I must thank you for coming forward to give evidence. I will continue to hear evidence, and I'll hear evidence from also those against whom evidence has been given relating to unlawful conduct or inappropriate conduct and misconduct. But if indeed in the end what you have told me about the struggles that you have said you have had for standing for the right things, to make sure the right things are done, it really would be very unfortunate, but we have to establish what the true position is so that the commission at the end can say this is what happens, can make findings, and then say, make recommendations as to what measures should be put in place to make sure that these things don't happen again, to make sure that with regard to IPIT, where IPIT personnel are investigating making investigations, they are not hindered. Instead, they are assisted to do their job in accordance with the requirements of the law. And where any other officials within the law enforcement agencies believe that they should not give assistance, they state that up front and give reasons so that those can be evaluated, and if need be, even more senior people within the executive must be approached to try and resolve it. And courts are really approached when there is no other way. But sometimes you just need proper leadership that will stand firm on what is right and what's wrong and get things sorted out, and things can be sorted out without going to court. It's just an unacceptable situation where within effectively the same organization, things can't be sorted out. But of course, those situations can arise, and when they arise, you might have no option but to go to court and try and get assistance, because sometimes the courts are the only places of refuge and places where the right decisions will be made to make sure that things are done in accordance with the law. But thank you very much for having come to give evidence, and probably you may be asked to come back on other matters that you have touched on. But thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Chair. And I pledge that we will assist the Commission in any way we can.
Yes.
To make sure that it discharges its mandate.
Yes.
But also, we hope that the work of the Commission will assist us.
Yes.
As public servants.
Yes.
So that when you do your work with integrity and stand firm for the truth, it's not career limiting.
Yes, yes, yes. No, thank you. I certainly hope that recommendations that we will make in the end must be able to show that as a country we appreciate the work of those who stand for what is right and who wants to do their job in the right way and who don't want to do wrong things. So we hope that recommendations we will make will facilitate that. But thank you very much. You are excused.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Wenzel, are you ready with Mr. Kuba?
I am ready. If I could just have a 15-minute or 5-minute break just to regroup and get my files together.
No, that's fine. We might not have a lot of time, but I think we must use whatever time we have.
Yes.
So, shall I give you, 10 minutes, 5 minutes?
Yes, it's fine.
10 or 5?
10, please.
10. Okay. We'll adjourn and we'll resume at 10 to 4.
Thank you.
We adjourn.
All rise. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
For your conference. Thank you so much. Accommodating us.
Do you know what? I think people have valuable inputs. You know, what you're saying when you hear that, this thing's
Okay.
Yes. Switch on your mic. Your next witness is Mr. Innocent Kuba.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Please administer the oath or affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record.
My name is Umbulani Innocent Kuba.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. Before you start, Ms. Wenzel,
Yes.
we took longer than we hoped we would with Mr. Sissoko, and tomorrow we won't be able to start at 9:30 with regard to the application for an order that Colonel Naidu's evidence be heard in camera,
Yes.
because another urgent meeting has arisen that I must attend to relating to commission work in the morning, and that would mean we are not also able to start at 10 to continue with Mr. Kuba's evidence, because we won't finish today. So I think that if it's fine with you and with Mr. Kuba, we should continue beyond 4 o'clock up to 5 to try and make sure that whatever is left for tomorrow, at least we have covered some ground. Is that fine with you?
Yes, Chair, that's perfectly suitable.
Yes. Mr. Kuba, would that be fine with you?
It's fine with me.
It's fine with you. Okay. Thank you. Let's continue.
Mr. Kuba, you have provided an affidavit to the Commission, is that correct?
That's correct.
If you have a look at the bundle in front of you, is that your affidavit marked pages 2 to 36? Can you see it actually says HIK 2002.
That's my affidavit.
Chair, if I might submit that into evidence marked Y4.1.
Well, the affidavit I have, you said his affidavit goes up to page 35.
36.
But it goes up, the one I have goes up to 27.
To 27.
27 of his affidavit and 28 of the paginated papers.
Chair, mine goes up to 36. Perhaps if we could just stand down for 2 minutes so I can see what has gone wrong here.
Don't you have somebody who might have the extra pages? Then we don't have to stand down. You can just give me the
Yes.
extra pages. So the pages that I don't have start at page 29 if you look at the paginated pages, otherwise page 28 of the affidavit itself.
I apologize, Chair, I'm not sure how that happened.
Yes, before we do that, let's complete that. Mr. Kuba, pages 2 of the bundle, that is now, if you look at the red numbers on the top right-hand corner, is page 2, which is page 1 of your affidavit. Most of the time when she refers to page numbers, she'll be referring to the red numbers, and she won't mention the letters and 00. She'll just say page 1, page 2, page 3, and so on. Okay? Now, from page 2 up to page 35 of the red numbers, the paginated pages, rather 36, that's where the commissioner's signature is. Is that your affidavit?
Yes, it's my affidavit.
Okay, and are the contents of that affidavit true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The liver arch file containing Mr. Kuba's affidavit and annexures will be marked Exhibit Y4. Yes, you can start there.
Chair, if it could be marked Y4.1, because there was an annexure that was omitted and a supplementary affidavit is being prepared, and I'd like to put that document in as exhibit marked Y4.2. So the main affidavit will be Y4.1 and the supplementary will be Y4.2, if that is convenient to you, Chair.
Well, let's do that now. So this liver arch file containing Mr. Kuba's affidavit will be marked Exhibit Y4.1. Just arrange for a marker to be used later on to
Yes, I will.
mark it. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kuba, if you have a look right at the end of the bundle at page 376 up until 379, is that the supplementary affidavit that you deposed to?
That is after the divider marked B.
Okay. That's correct. It's mine.
Thank you. And you confirm that's true and correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Kuba,
Ms. Wenzel, you know, Mr. Sissoko referred to, in his evidence, to Mr. Mhlongo, I think he said Mhlongo, who he said had a recording of Brigadier Homo asking him or them to implicate Mr. Sissoko, I think, and Mr. McBride in some wrongdoing. I think when Mr. McBride gave his evidence earlier this year, he did mention that. What I can't remember is whether that recording was made available to the Commission and whether I have listened to it or not. Just check that so that if it has not been made available, or it has been made available but it has not been played in the open hearing, then so that can be done in due course. But also I wanted to find out whether there were plans in place to call Mr. Mhlongo, who had that discussion with Brigadier Homo.
No, not as yet, but I will make arrangements to consult.
Yeah, well, those plans should have been made. That should have been part of the plan even before you came on board,
Yes.
because that evidence was given in, I think it was April or March, and there should by now have been a statement from Mr. Mhlongo.
Yes.
But also there must be an identification of certain people in the evidence of Mr. McBride, Mr. Sissoko, Mr. Kuba, in relation to various events and incidents. There must be an identification of certain people who must be issued with Regulation 10.6 directives, calling upon them to file affidavits dealing with allegations that have been made against them. But also there should be a plan to make sure those people can be called to give evidence. That includes Mr. Khamanyana, who was acting executive director when Mr. McBride was on suspension, but also this team from Northwest that Mr. Sissoko talked about, that
The
he
mobility.
alleged was interfering with their investigations. Those people must be given a chance to respond to the allegations and must be able to be called to give evidence. And also the various national commissioners of police who have refused to declassify documents, acting commissioners and whoever. Regulation 10.6 directives have to be issued for them to respond to the allegations and ultimately to come and give evidence. So share that with the legal team.
Yes.
So that steps can be taken.
Yes, I will attend to that, Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Kuba, could you tell the Chair the history of your employment at IPID?
Well, maybe before just the history of employment at IPID, you could just take a few seconds to talk about yourself. What was your background before you came to IPID and so on?
Thank you. I joined the IPAD in 1999. If I remember very well, it was 1st January. And before that, I was with Anglo American, where I was conducting investigation in gold theft. So
In what theft?
theft of gold.
Gold.
Yeah, I used to work closely with the Gold and Diamond branch in Springs, Johannesburg.
Is that branch of the police?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
I joined the ICD on a rank of an assistant director, where I was responsible for investigation and supervising investigators. In the year 2000, I was then requested to extend my services to Free State, which by then was not having a provincial office established. So I was given 2 members of SAPS to supervise while I was still responsible for Northern Cape. Then, towards the end of 2000, that is when I was appointed acting head of the province, Northern Cape, because the person who was my direct supervisor was a provincial head, had been moved to Free State to establish the office there because statistically it was generating more cases than Northern Cape. So I remain responsible for Northern Cape. And 2001, I was appointed as now a provincial head, but not for Northern Cape, but for Limpopo province.
This was now before IPET was established.
Before IPET, it
You were
was
with
still
the
ICD.
predecessor of IPET, the organization, what it was called before.
It was called ICD.
Yes, I'm saying you were with that organization at the time.
That's correct.
Yes, okay.
So 2003, while I was the provincial head for Limpopo, they requested me to go and manage Mpumalanga office. By that time, it was established, but the provincial head there seemingly left, and I was the one responsible supervising 2 provinces. So I used to do it on a weekly basis.
This is what year now?
2003,
Okay, still under ICD.
still under ICD.
What did ICD stand for again, or you've got it here?
Independent-
Independent Complaints Directorate.
Independent Complaints
Directorate.
Directorate.
Okay.
That's correct.
So
Then,
it was Limpopo and Northern Cape, or which provinces were you be responsible for it now?
I was responsible for Limpopo and Mpumalanga.
Okay.
During, when I was the provincial head, I was on a deputy director level. Then on the 1st of July 2007, that is when I was promoted to a director level, but still having the same responsibilities as provincial head. In 2011, I was transferred to KZN for 6 months, where I was requested to set up the office, because by that time the office was battling to meet strategic objectives of the department. So I was requested to go and set up systems and also try to assist the office to achieve strategic objectives. Then, at the beginning of 2012, after I had already returned to Limpopo, I was requested to head the task team called the Katomena Task Team, where we were investigating the so-called the death squad. I was given members from various provinces, but it was predominantly investigators from Northwest. Then after that, I was threatened. And when I was threatened, I still remember they did threat analysis. They sent people of the SSA, by that time it used to be called NIA, National Intelligence Agency. They came and they did assessment, and they told me, because they visited me at the hotel at night, and they told me that you have to leave. The following day, I think I got the earliest flight, and I left. I still remember I left the car there. Now, when I came
I'm sorry, you say as soon as you left the first flight the following morning,
yeah, I think it was the first flight I had to.
after they had notified you the previous night
Yes,
to say you have to leave
yes.
because the
The threats were real.
threats were real.
Yeah.
That is to kill you.
Yes.
Okay.
Then I left, went back to
Did they indicate where the threats came from?
There was an indication that they got information from a guy who was belonging to a taxi association who was requested to shoot me, but he had some reservations and he informed them.
Okay. And was that connected with your work?
It was connected with my work.
Okay.
I then left, and then when I was back in Limpopo, then that is when I was told that I'm going to be dealing with a rendition. That was 2012. I was appointed to investigate rendition. But before that rendition, I was requested to investigate allegations which were raised by a parliamentary member against General Sibiya. Then I assembled a very small team, and then I investigated the allegation. I provided a report, and the matter were concluded. And then shortly after that, that is when I was appointed to investigate illegal rendition.
The allegations against General Sibiya that you investigated, after you made your report would have gone to who? Who did you submit it to?
I sent a report to the DPP Gauteng because those cases, it was not only a one case, it was a number of cases.
Against him?
Against him. Including assault. I think the majority was assault. Then, one of the cases which I remember very well, which was Boxbeck case, it was already investigated by our Gauteng office, and the report had already been produced and sent to DPP, and the DPP declined to prosecute.
So the report was saying prosecute?
No, it was,
it
was not recommending prosecution.
Oh, okay.
But I took over the investigation and identified a number of discrepancies in that investigation. I found that there were witnesses who were not contacted.
Interviewed?
Who were not interviewed. Some of the people were treated as witnesses, whereas they were suspects.
Yes.
I did an investigation, and after that, a report was done, which could have meant that it was a second report for the department, but it was the first report from me. Now, when I sent that report, I still remember I had consultation with advocate, the head of the DPP, as well as the prosecutor was assigned to deal with the case. And they said, okay, you can do us a favor. We saw your report. We look at the additional evidence that you got. Give us the chance to consult with all the witnesses. I made that arrangement. They consult with the witnesses, and finally, they wrote back to me. They said, despite having acquired additional evidence, we are still of the view as NPA, that there is no prospect of successful prosecution. Then I got that information, I related the information to the complainant, and also because I had a discussion with them, and I said, because the complainant was a person who was just keep on calling me now and then, also indicate to him what would be the avenue if you decided not to prosecute. And they wrote there to say to him, you can pursue private prosecution. I then wrote a letter to the complainant, and I wrote a letter to General Sibiya to say that I investigated a case against you. Please be informed that the DPP declined to prosecute. And that is when it was concluded.
Yes.
Could you explain to the chair how it was that you came to be involved in the rendition investigation?
The rendition investigation, I was informed earlier that I would investigate the case. But at that time, I did not have enough facts in terms of what really happened. Because I remember there was a meeting where we met with the Secretary of Police, Jenny Koboshiane, had a discussion. And in the meeting, that is where she indicated that the minister would want you to investigate it, but for now, he wants you to hold off. That particular day, we did not get any documents or any docket for investigation.
And this would have been around 2011?
In my statement, because I checked my records, and there's been a little bit of conflicting in my records because normally I would not rely on memory. I will check. I remember there was a trip that I took around July 2012 where I indicated specifically purpose of the meeting. But that's a meeting that I took as if the meeting where we met with Koboshiane about the event.
So is your position that you think it must have been around mid-2012 when you met with Mr. Koboshiane?
That is the record that I took from the travel claims that I did.
Yes. Because Mr. Sissoko, if I recall correctly, thought that you were the first time that he became aware that the minister wanted some investigation to be done in relation to the so-called rendition, but said that, or they were told that to hold on until further notice from the minister. He thought that must have been around towards the end of 2011. You are not sure?
I never relied on my recollection when I put the information.
Yes.
I relied on the information that I wrote on my travel claim.
Yes.
So I know that I had numerous meetings with also Koboshiane, because there was a time when I went there, I think she also wanted me to just speak to her about how the investigation was going. But this one in the trip authority that I did, it was kind of really revolving around. And I was aware of the information that it could have been 20. But the point of the matter is that I need to put what I can beg when I can see.
Yes, okay.
That's correct.
So you'd be more inclined to think it was around mid-year 2012.
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
And what then happened, according to your statement, on the 23rd of October 2012? If you have regard to paragraph 13 on page 4.
That is when Mr. Sissoko informed me that he had received instruction from the executive director that now that case needs to be investigated. By that time, the former executive director, that is Francois Biekman, had already left the department, and the person who was acting in his place was Ms. Kukimbeki. So he handed to me an appointment letter and the docket, which after that I perused. The case number was Deep Sluot 390 of 7/2012. And upon my perusal of the docket, because I wanted to check the work which was done, I realized that there were almost 13 statements. Most of these statements were from crime intelligence members and members of the family of the alleged deported individual. So I was also requested to assemble the team, and because I was well acquainted with my staff, I had to source the capacity from my office. Then I chose Mr. Mapetu, Mr. Mulauzi, Mr. Mashapu, and Mr. Rachitali to assist me.
Before we move on, you'll see that the case number for the docket was Deep Sluot. Was there something written on the outside of that docket which was of interest to you?
That's correct. The case number was Deep Sluot, but on top there was a case number Etwatwa. So I had an engagement with Colonel Mukangwe after my perusal. We had our meeting at Empire's Palace, and I wanted to find out why
Empire's Palace here in Gauteng.
That's correct. I wanted to find out why there are two case numbers and different stations. And that is when he told me that they had to register it at Itwatwa on the basis that they were afraid that if they could register it at Deep Slot, before any investigation is done, it will raise some red flags, and probably those people who are investigated would be able to interfere with witnesses or try to interfere with the investigation. So it was just done for concealment.
And is Etwata a police station in Limpopo, one of the police stations in Limpopo? But what is Etwata? Does it refer to any police station?
What I was made to understand is that Etwata is the police station around Gauteng, not in Limpopo.
Oh, not in Limpopo.
That's correct.
But you have no idea where that police station is?
No,
Do you know if it actually exists or not?
I did not even check.
Okay.
Could you explain to the chair who you were requested to deal with in this investigation and who you were requested to exclude from the investigation?
Then when I commenced with my work, the then acting executive director, Ms. Kukimbeki, gave me an instruction verbally to say that I need to work with Mukangwe, whom I understood was the initial investigator on the basis number of statements had been commissioned, I think by him, or he was part of that investigation. But in that instruction to work with him, it came with a lead to say, keep his involvement secret. And I had some concerns about that on the basis that my perusal of the docket was not merely to check number of statements per se. It involved reading the content of each and every statement. And I still remember I had a paper where I was scribbling to check what was going on per statement, what type of leads I was going to find. Then I realized that number of people who were involved in this rendition process were also CI members. So I felt that there was some level of conflict there because they were involved in this rendition or deportation.
That is now CI being crime intelligence.
That's correct.
And Colonel Mukangwe was a member of the crime intelligence.
That's correct.
Yes, okay. And if there were 13 statements already in the file when it was handed over to you, that seems to suggest to me that substantial work had been done.
One could say that, unless if one goes to the content of these statements.
Okay.
The family member statements obviously would talk to the issue of when the police came and arrested, or when did they lastly saw their loved ones. But the members of the police statements talk to when they arrested these people, that General Sibia was there. To an extent that even two of the Zimbabwean nationals who were at that time when I took over the investigation were under witness protection. In their statement, they were alleging that General Sibia was there, was wearing a suit. Some of the members of CI, they were saying, we saw a figure seated in a BMW. And I was told that was General Sibia. So the investigation it spoke also about the issue of the money which was stolen, but it did not have corroboration much. But it was more of an allegation.
Did you later try and involve your boss, essentially, Mr. Siseko, in this investigation?
When I was told that I should keep Colonel Mukangwe's involvement a secret, I indicated to Ms. Kukimbeki that I will be involving Mr. Sisoko in this investigation, because my experience has always told me that normally when I do investigation, I don't report to the head of the department. I report to the direct supervisor, who then reports to the executive director, depending on the level. Now, when I said that, she categorically indicated to me that Mr. Sisoko should not be involved. And because Mr. Sisoko was not merely a national head of investigation, he was my supervisor. I then went to him and informed him about this thing. And I did so because I wanted his view. And he said to me, she is the head of the department. If she says you must not involve me, don't involve me.
Ms. Wenzel, I take it that both Mr. Sisoko's statement, or relevant portions thereof, and Mr. Cooper's statement, at least the relevant portions thereof, that affect Ms. Kukimbeki, were sent to her.
Yes.
And I take it that there's been no response.
Yes.
Is that something you know? Is that something you don't know?
There have been one or two responses and I've received one late last night, and I want to check who it came from because I think it might be her attorneys. Apparently, the one I'm referring to wasn't from her attorneys, but the Rule 33s were sent to her timelessly.
Yes, I think plans must be put in place for Regulation 10.6 directive in regard to her as well, so
Yes.
that she can be directed to file an affidavit dealing with these allegations.
Yes, I'll
Okay.
attend to that as well. Now, you say in your statement, after having had this conversation with Mr. Sisoko, you continued to investigate the case without Mr. Sisoko's involvement, and you kept Colonel Mukankwe apprised of the situation. Can you just tell the chair about your dealings with Colonel Mukankwe, where you would meet, which email addresses you were asked to use?
Colonel Mukangwe's involvement in my investigation, there were times when he was part of the interviews that I did. He was part of meetings that I had with the prosecutors who were guiding the case. We were sharing every part of the docket. But that was after I requested the then acting executive director whether I should be able to give him, if he requests, documents. And I was told that he is member of the team. You can share him with anything. The only thing that I have to do was to keep his involvement secret. So there were times that I would give him a call and tell him that I got certain information. And he had been very instrumental because with his experience in the SAP. Sometimes when I would have some challenges, I would tell him to say, I have a problem, I cannot get 1, 2, 3 individual. And with no time, he'll just come back to me and say, use this channel, you will be able to get hold of them. Now, when I gave him progress, sometimes he would request me to email things. The first email that he gave me was botsotsomokangwe@gmail.com. So I used to send any document, any statement to him. But when I started to be able to get serious information, I'm saying serious on the basis that it implicated senior people, he gave me a new email address. It was june16@gmail.com. But it gave me suspicion because the Botsotso Mokangwe's email, I would email from my laptop because I had a 3G. At anywhere I could open my emails and attach it or email something or information, even though sometimes I would have to go to the office to scan the document into my email. Now, when he gave me that email, he categorically indicated that I should not use the official email. And he advised me to use an email or the facility at Southern Sun, where I used to stay while I was investigating the case.
Is that Southern Sun Hotel?
Yes, in Pretoria.
In Pretoria.
That's correct.
The email address that you had used before he gave you the one which you said was June 16 at Gmail or whatever, was that his official email address, the first one that you were using?
No, I'm not really sure, but what I was aware of is that the crime intelligence people, normally they use, mostly they don't use official emails. It's Gmails or Yahoo, but not, I never experienced someone who would say, send me. So the one he gave at Botsotso, I was more comfortable because I used to call him, he told me that his name is Botsotso Mokangwe. So it's the first name. I was somehow given assurance by the mere glance at the email to say it's his.
That it was his?
Yeah.
Okay. You became concerned when he gave you the June 16 one and said, don't use the other one, or don't use his official email.
That's correct, most especially when June 16 is it has some political connection.
Yes, yes.
Now, after you met Colonel Mokangwe, you say in paragraph 20 of your statement, he instructed you to work with 2 advocates from the National Prosecuting Authority, Advocate Moseng and Moletsi. What reason was given to you for that?
He told me that these are people who had been guiding this investigation, which means while he was investigating the case, he was consulting with them.
And you say in paragraph 26 on page 7 that Advocate Moseng was for some reason extremely keen to finalize the rendition investigation and put pressure on me to prioritize the investigation. Could you just expand on that?
When I was doing this investigation, I was on dual roles. I was still responsible for Limpopo, and on the other hand, I had to investigate the case. So I would
And you ceased to be also responsible for Mpumalanga?
by
or
that
were you
time,
st-
I had already ceased long time ago.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I had a challenge because when I went back to the office, I had to check the work done, making sure that the office is performing well. There was one time, I still remember, I got an email where he was saying that, when are we going to finalize this thing? And I told him that there is an unrest at Ralela around Tsanin. So I cannot leave the situation like this because the provincial commissioner wanted me to go there and assist in calming down the situation. He was really keen to get these things submitted or finalized.
You were based in the Limpopo. Did you frequently come and consult with him in Pretoria?
I consulted with him so many a times that I cannot remember how many. And it will be very rare to come and do investigation and not end up visiting him at the office.
And what happened on one occasion when you were consulting with him and Ms. Mbeki saw you there?
There was a time when I was busy trying to draft the 205 applications. And I went to our head office. I received a call from the personal assistant of Ms. Mbeki, who said to me that the acting executive director had seen you around here, and she gave me a message to tell you that you are here on your own. I won't pay for your accommodation. I won't pay for your travel cost. You need to see how you cover those expenses, because you did not tell me that you are coming for investigation in Pretoria. I had a challenge with that because the previous week on Friday, I had already sent a weekly work plan, which spell out my activities for the following week. And as usual, she would not comment on weekly work plan. And every provincial head knew that when you send your weekly work plan and you don't get feedback, it means it's all right, you can continue. So I was surprised when I was queried on that. Then I decided that I need to formalize this because it was communicated to me telephonically. And then I sent an email to her, which I'm going to just read because I paraphrased it here. I sent it on the 5th of July, 2013. I said this.
I think you mean paragraph 27.
Oh, paragraph 27, sorry, yeah. So, in that email, I indicated that please give me an opportunity to be able to do this work. I don't have a problem in covering my cost for accommodation, and even if you don't pay me for travel cost, I still fine. I then arranged with my uncle, because I felt that on the other side I'm getting pressure that I finalize this. On the other pressure, I'm being told, you cannot really come here. You were supposed to talk to me, but I had already sent a weekly work plan. So I then phoned my uncle and I said, can I get an accommodation for tonight? Then he said it was okay. I drove and then I arranged in a private accommodation. And after that, I continued.
Then what happened when Mr. Musing wanted you to come again?
Then, after that incident, Advocate Musing requested me to come to Pretoria. Then I told him, I said, no, I can't come. You need to talk to my boss first. Because the last time I came there, she had some issues with it. And then I requested him to send an email where he CC'd me. The email was sent on the 5th of July 2013. That is where he said, "Dear Mrs. Mbeki, I confirm that I met with Mr. Kuba this week where we discussed progress of this matter. I'm instructed by my principal to draw up charge sheets. I'm in the progress to do so. There are, however, certain investigations discussed with Mr. Kuba that require speedy attention. The plan is to wrap up this investigation without delay, and we agreed that he devote the whole next week for this purpose. If not possible to complete the charge sheet when there are issues it is not possible to complete the charge sheet when there are issues outstanding. I trust that you will give him the necessary permission support to finalize this. Especially now that very important new statements were obtained this week. I trust that you will find this in order. Kind regard, Advocate Musing."
Chair, you will find that letter, it's Annexure HIK2 at page 44. Now, what did you notice about the contents of this email? Was it CC'd to you, this email?
That's correct.
What did you notice about it?
The one thing that stand out from this email for me is that it shows that I was not the only person who was getting pressure from. It shows that the pressure I was getting was as a result of the pressure he was getting. So because he says, I'm getting pressure from my seniors. So which means the pressure which I was getting was as a result of the pressure which he was getting. The other thing is that he made mention of the charge sheet. And for me, it's something that raises eyebrows when you have outstanding investigation, yet you want to do the charge sheet. Unless if that such outstanding investigation or whatever evidential material you need, it's for one-sided, it's only to support your version. It cannot contradict. But in the investigation, I've learned that you can be surprised on something that you thought it is in a particular way, but you get something that contradicts that.
So, is your point that it was strange that he had already made up his mind that there would be a charge sheet? So in other words, they would charge somebody, and yet the investigation was not complete.
That's correct.
Now, Mr. Kuba, what were the important new statements that had been obtained that week that were referred to?
The new statements which he referred to were the statements which were obtained from members of crime intelligence. And these are the statements which people who were involved in the arrest of these Zimbabwean nationals deposed and indicated that when they arrest one of the wanted person, they took him to Silverton, where the Hawks offices are. And when they were there, that is when they saw General Dramat and General Dramat and the spokesperson of the Hawks by then, who was Macintosh Pulelo. Now, by that time, I had obtained a number of statements which point to, there were 3 members of crime intelligence, but when they did their operation, they were assisted by TRT members. So they took this person together with TRT members to Silverton. But of these statements that I obtained, it was only the crime intelligence members who said when they were with the person there, General Dramat came, and he came with the spokesperson, and he thanked them for the work well done. And he was coming from house number 3 to house number 1. Now, that information seems to be very crucial. But when I went to the other part of the people who were there, because they did a braai there, they ate there, they were there. When I went to the other part, all TRT members, none of them remembered. They said, no, there was no such. Now, that created a problem for me. To say...
They were saying General Dramat had not been involved.
Yeah, they said, they said they didn't see General Dramat. It was only CI members.
Who said they saw him?
They saw him.
Or were told he was there.
Yeah, they say he came with the spokesperson.
Yes.
And they said he thanked them. And he looked at this guy who was arrested, about to be deported illegally. And after that, he left. But when I interviewed the TRT member, which the number of the TRT member was greater than the number
Of the crime intelligence
the
people.
crime intelligence, none of them could ever mention. They mentioned everything except the issue of Dramat going there.
Yes.
Now, I felt, okay, it's fine. I went and...
Well, tell me a little bit about the numbers. You say the one group was, their number was greater than the other. What numbers are we talking about?
I cannot remember out of my head, but it was around 5 to 7, somewhere there.
Yes, okay.
And the CI were only 3.
But all the CI ones said he came.
Yeah,
All the other ones said, we never saw him.
that's correct.
Okay.
Now, I then took the investigation a little further to say, I have to speak with the spokesperson because these CI members are saying that they saw him together with General Dramat. But when I approached him, I obtained a statement from him. He said he never, that never happened. And I'm talking about a person whom at a time when I interviewed him, he was fired from the Hawks. He was no longer working. It was almost a month or 3 months or 4 months after he was dismissed. So I was expecting a person who would spill the beans. And he said no. He gave me information pertaining to the meetings that had happened between General Dramat and the Zimbabweans. But that information never related to the meeting the questionable meeting, which took place on the 5th of November. Because he himself joined the Hawks in December, not in November. So it means that it was another meeting, not the questionable one, which I was investigating.
And the November and December that you are referring to are for which year?
I cannot remember. I just need to check, but if it's not 2020, 2011, somewhere there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you say that a key witness in the investigation was Colonel Madilonga. Can you just explain why he was a key witness and what happened with his statement?
The key witness, Mr. Colonel Madilonga, unfortunately he's late now. He deposed a statement, and in that statement, he was the first person before these CI members to implicate General Dramat. He said he received a call from Maluleke. He laid the whole background in terms of where it started. But he said one day while he was working at the border, he saw some vehicle that seemed to be vehicles of diplomats. And then he went there and he was told these are Zimbabwean police and they are looking to enter the country in order to see General Dramat. So in his statement, he said he called General Dramat, but firstly, before he called General Dramat, he spoke with his superiors to get permission, and the superiors told him that they do not know of anything that you need to call General Dramat himself. He said he called General Dramat, Dramat allowed him to allow them in. Now, when I interviewed him, when I was obtaining his statement, I had a file that I requested from General Dramat. The file was for internal investigation because when this issue of illegal rendition came out, it seems as he appointed someone to conduct investigation. So in that file, there was a statement of Colonel Madilonga. Colonel Madilonga, in his statement, never made mention of Dramat, never made mention of the call that he made, and never made mention that he assisted Captain Maluleke to let the Zimbabwean police pass together with the people who were arrested, who were deported illegally. Now, I questioned him, but unfortunately, that statement was signed by him, but was not commissioned. He agreed that it's his own statement. But he said that statement was not commissioned, so I cannot really charge him for perjury. And I asked him, why did you put this information? He said he was forced to put information. Now, what made me not to believe what he was saying was that if then I force somebody to make a statement and make a statement, the first thing that I do is to write to the police, to run to the police station and get the statement commissioned. If then in any how they really wanted him to lie, why didn't they commission the statement? Because they would have bound him forever.
So which statement was commissioned?
The statement which was commissioned was the one that I took with him. Then there were a lot of things that really happened, like the leakage of information, and I started to worry. I started to have a problem with the credibility of Madilonga as a witness. I then took his statement for analysis. That was, I think it was on the 4th of October, if I'm not mistaken, 2013. And I requested, there was another person who spoke to me and says, I know how to analyze statement, I studied in the USA or overseas. Then I indicated to this person, I says, can you do it for me for free? You know, I think you are just really a help from God. I want to get this information right. Then she took that statement, she analyzed it and gave me the report. Sorry, she gave me the outcome. The report was not there. I saw she indicated how she analyzed the statement, and she says, here and there and there and there, Colonel Madilonga was lying.
As at that stage, what was your understanding of what it was that General Sibiya and General Dramat were suspected of having done that was illegal?
I heard so many times, even with my consultation with Advocate Musing, that they gave that operation a blessing.
Was your understanding that the thing that General Dramat and General Sibiya were alleged to have done that was illegal was to give the operation a blessing? Because I'm trying to understand exactly what it is, what unlawful conduct or criminal conduct was alleged against them in this so-called rendition Because everybody was saying rendition, rendition, rendition. What exactly was it that they were said to have done, which was said to have been unlawful or illegal or criminal?
I think that has a little bit of a very short explanation. Firstly, on the basis that the person who assisted the Zimbabwean police Captain Maluleke was residing within the DPCI.
That is the Hawks.
The Hawks, where General Dramat was the head.
Was the head, yes.
And the operation took place in Gauteng, where Sibia was responsible as the provincial head of the Hawks.
But what was the illegal act, as you understood it? You were the person who was asked to investigate, I take it, something illegal that they had allegedly done.
There was nothing we could really say this is illegal. And we had discussions, a lot of discussions with Colonel Mukangwe and Advocate Musing. And what I was told quite often is that, Mr. Kuba, you don't expect a person of Dramat's rank or Sibia's rank to be involved in that level that you expect. They could only tie them because they said, how could this happen while they were there? That's why when I got the statement of Madilonga, which indicated that he made a call to General Dramat to request a permission whether he could allow the Zimbabwean police to enter. When I sent that statement to Advocate Musing and to Colonel Mukangwe, it was like a Christmas. They were very happy. Because now you have the name that is linked, but it's not linked to the rendition, it's linked to the police.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to understand. Was it alleged that they were complicit in the murder of some of those Zimbabweans? Was it alleged that they were complicit in getting the Zimbabweans handed over to the Zimbabwean police, and that handing over was illegal? Was it alleged that they were complicit in permission being granted to the Zimbabwean police to enter the South African borders, and that entry by the South African Zimbabwean police was illegal? What exactly was said to be illegal that they had done, or was said to be a crime?
They said they were complicit in allowing or assisting Zimbabwean national to get the people they wanted and leave the country without following the extradition process. Hence, there is an issue of, and this arises from a number of issues. Number one, there were success reports. These success reports were written by Maluleke, and they were supposed to be signed by a person who was Maluleke's superior, Verster. I think she was a full colonel because Maluleke was a lieutenant colonel or a captain, somewhere there, because after that I think he became a lieutenant colonel and he left as a lieutenant colonel. Now, those success reports which I got from the Hawks offices, indicated that we managed to arrest the Zimbabwean nationals who were wanted in connection with something that took place in Zimbabwe, arising from the meeting that they had with General Dramat on this particular day. I think that is where they were.
So as you understood it, the conduct on the part of General Dramat and General Sibiya that was alleged to have been unlawful or illegal or criminal was that they had been party to arrangements for these Zimbabweans to be handed over to leave the country without following extradition procedures.
That's correct.
Okay, and as you understood it, if there was evidence for that, that would be a crime.
That is not what I understood from the beginning.
Yes.
That is what I was made to understand.
Yes.
On the basis that there were times when I would raise these issues, when we were discussing this case. But for me as an investigator, when there is a prosecutor guiding the case, you kind of really, I look at a case from the investigation point of view, and the prosecutor look at the case from the prosecution point of view. So I thought that it was probably because he was the one, I thought he was the one who was going to prosecute the case. Said, it means that he's going to pull it out.
Who are you referring to now when you say?
Advocate Musing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But of course, when you are asked to investigate a crime, whether somebody has been involved in a crime, surely you have to understand what crime is being alleged, isn't it?
That's correct.
Because otherwise, you could be expected to investigate the crime of murder, and yet you are investigating the crime of theft.
That's correct.
Yes. So it's important that the investigator understands what the crime is that he is investigating.
That's correct.
But you say at the beginning, your understanding wasn't that what the two were alleged to have done that was alleged to be illegal or criminal. It wasn't your understanding that it was that they had assisted in handing over the Zimbabweans and to assist the Zimbabwean police to get them and go away with them. That wasn't your understanding initially. Is that right, or am I confusing you?
Let me clarify.
Yeah.
I think we need to differentiate different stages of acquiring evidence. Now, from the beginning, there was not even a mention of General Dramat. It came up from Madilonga's statements. Then you come to the issue of the success reports. Then you come to the statement of CI members. Now, at a time when I acquired this evidence, number one, the statement of Madilonga, I felt that it was not sufficient to put his name there and to say that he really participated. But we had a discussion to say that if then we are charging Maluleka for kidnapping, and there is this other evidence that shows that when these people were arrested and Then he went there from house number 3 to house number 1, congratulated the people and says, "You did a good job." My main concern is that if he was running that operation, he was the one who's overseeing that operation, he would have checked the process that they are going to follow from that onwards. And it's an issue of, when we talk about the role that General Sevilla played, with the General Sevilla, there were witnesses who were saying that they saw him at the scene, and he also kicked one of the victims. So on that, when we had a discussion, I knew what is needed in order to prove the case. In terms of saying that Dramat probably can be prosecuted for this. But in the earlier discussion that we had, when I was told that these people, General Dramat, General Sevilla, they have been an accomplice to this thing. Because you see the meeting which was held, you see the call which was made, and also the statements of CI members saying that he came from house number 1 and congratulated them for work done.
But going back to my earlier question, was your understanding at the beginning when you were asked to investigate this matter, was your understanding that you were investigating the possible commission of the crime of kidnapping, or what crime did you understand that you were being asked to investigate from the beginning?
From the beginning, I was told that I was supposed to investigate kidnapping. I was told to investigate, there was theft. I was told to investigate assault and possible defeating the ends of justice.
Okay, so it was a number of crimes.
It was number of issues.
Oh, okay, all
Yeah.
right. Okay. But based on that, it seems that there was nothing, there was no crime that you were supposed to investigate which was said to arise from a breach of any extradition procedures. It was assaulting, it was kidnapping, it was whatever else, but from what you said, it looks like there was nothing about so and so did this in breach of the law relating to extradition procedures.
That's correct.
Yes. And then, but did you say later on you were either told or you formed the view that part of what you were supposed to be investigating, or what part of what you should investigate, is whether General Dramat and General Sevilla were complicit in assisting the departure from South Africa of the Zimbabweans in breach of extradition procedures?
That's correct.
Okay, and about how long after you had started was that when you got to understand that that's part of what you were supposed to look at?
It was when I started after I got the statement of Madilonga and acquiring of success reports from DPCI.
Yes. And that, are you able to locate that in terms of timelines, timeframes?
I can say 2013.
2013?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I didn't realize we have gone past 5 o'clock. We will have to stop now for today. We are going to continue tomorrow, but we won't start at 10 o'clock. We won't start at 9:30. What will happen is that at 11 o'clock, I will start with an application that was adjourned, which shouldn't take long at all. Maybe it might take 30 minutes, and as soon as we are done with that, we would then continue with you. So you must please come back tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Wenzel, you have heard what I've said about the application.
Yes.
I earlier on asked that Mr. Peterson be asked to inform all concerned about the change in terms of time. And I understand he got that message.
Okay.
Yes. We'll adjourn for the day, and then tomorrow we'll start at 11 o'clock. We adjourn.
All rise.
Monday, as I'm saying, you